Hi, I've had this 5 megapixel surveillance camera for a while and I decided I would fit it over the Christmas break. It's the Reolink RLC 410 and it's 5 megapixel camera. So I was pretty pleased with the day and night performance and I decided I would extend the system with an additional RLC 810, which is an 8 megapixel 4K camera, and a dedicated NVR instead of using my Qnap NAS. So normally I would just shoot videos of me doing things, but this time I thought there's quite a lot, it's a bit involved. I'll do a little summary first and I'll put in some links so you can jump to any sections that are of specific interest for you. So my main reason for having a camera was to survey visitors and deliveries and things like that, and that's because my lab is quite away from the delivery point. You know, as a bonus I get some additional security footage and things like that, but that wasn't the primary reason. It's mainly about visitors and deliveries. And I didn't want to spend a huge amount of money on this. I wanted decent cameras, reasonable quality, sensible price. I'm not going to do a camera comparison. There are definitely better cameras available. No doubt people will leave comments down below about that. There are also worse cameras available. But certainly my experience so far is the 5 megapixel camera, and yeah, I was pretty pleased with it. You know, nice image quality, nice nighttime performance, reasonable identification of events happening and things like that. But I decided that I wanted to increase the resolution on the driveway, which is the delivery area, and go to an 8 megapixel camera, and that I would move the 5 megapixel camera to the lab entrance to actually survey the lab entrance itself. So in terms of the cameras and the installation, I had no real problem at all, and the software from Reolink installed perfectly adequately as well. So overall I was pretty pleased. So I had a few problems when I moved to the 8 megapixel camera, not from the camera but from wanting to use it with some software on the NAS. I had to switch from Surveillance Station to QVR Pro, and that was, you know, tricky, but got there and it was really good. However, when I then switched to using the Reolink NVR, I had quite a lot of setup problems with that, but I can show you how to get around those when we get to the relevant part of the recording. So we start the story. My 5 megapixel camera is working, it's stuck on the wall, it's working with the Reolink software and also with QNAP Surveilance Station, which is free software from QNAP, and that was recording events as they happened. I wasn't doing like 24-hour constant rolling recording, and it worked fine. And the client software for the QNAP Surveillance Station was fine. I could run that on my desktop PC, for example. So anyway, I physically swapped around the 5 megapixel for an 8 megapixel, and my first impression was the 8 megapixel was not as good quality camera, in particular in poor light, so dusk conditions. It's probably about the same as the 5 megapixel when you go to true infrared. So that was a little bit of a disappointment. During bright sunlight and things like that, yes, it is definitely better. But something to be aware of, the 5 megapixel is a 4:3 aspect ratio and the 8 megapixel is a 16:9. So you don't really get the improvement that you might be thinking. You get a wider field of vision. The big problem for me though was that having swapped them around, the Reolink software worked fine. It identified them both, not a problem. But Surveillance Station on the QNAP would not recognize the 8 megapixel camera, despite the fact it's from a manufacturer that it already recognized the camera from. Yeah, it was not happy with it at all. Now I solved that by switching across and using a piece of software called QVR Pro, which is also QNAP software. And that comes with a free license for 8 cameras. And will stream and store data for 14 days, and it maintains a database, and it's a very professional piece of video surveillance kit. It's the type of thing you would use in a proper installation, and you can even network multiple sets of camera sets and things like that, and you've got streams and push notifications out to phones and all sorts of stuff. You've got facial recognition, all sorts of things available in that software, and it worked great, and I was really pleased with the interface, and I kind of would have left it with that, but the only thing I didn't like was the fact that now I was streaming 8 kilobits per second, so 8 megabits per second for the big camera and 6 megabits per second for the smaller camera. onto the NAS, I wasn't very happy with my disks being used for that all the time, the amount of space that I had to pre-allocate for it, and things like that. So I decided that I would add, I've written on the slide actually MVC, but of course it's an NVR, so a network video recorder, which is dedicated to the cameras, and I decided to buy the Reolink one because the cameras should just be plug and play in that. Now, when it turned up, I discovered that really it's designed to sit there with a dedicated monitor and mouse on a desktop, and that is not how I intend to use it at all. It's tucked away in a data cupboard with servers and things like that, and I want to use it from a client PC, desktop PC, remotely. And you can do that with the Reolink NVR, but it turned out that I couldn't set my cameras up in that configuration. Yeah, there was the air was blue, shall we say, as I tried to configure my cameras to work with that. I did get it working eventually, and I will share what I found with you so that you don't have to go through that same painful experience if you go down this route. Now, in fairness, it would have worked perfectly had I not previously used the cameras, but having previously used the cameras, I'd got security set up on them, so passwords and things like that. And as a result, the NVR wouldn't connect to them, and because it wouldn't connect to them, I then couldn't use it to configure them. And as soon as I plugged in the NVR, plugged them into the NVR, I should say, then they stopped being available on the wider network. So I couldn't use any of my other software to configure them either. So yeah, that was pretty messy and pretty annoying. I nearly sent the thing back. But as it happens, once I figured it out, all was well, and now it's up and running. It's not as professional as the QVC Pro software, but it works just fine for what I want it. So anyway, let's go and have a look at some of the clips. We'll start off by looking at the unboxing of the 810. Okay, and there we go. So this is a Reolink RLC 810A camera. So it's a video surveillance camera, 8 megapixels, so 4K resolution. Now this has a different movement system. This actually discriminates people and cars from other types of movement. And one of the problems that I have with my other camera is that across the driveway, down the side of the building and things like that, there are large areas where trees and things like that cast moving shadows. And those are causing false alarms. So I'm hoping this one will be better both in terms of resolution and also in terms of its alarms. Let's take a quick look at it. So first up, we've just got the little bag with the various bits and pieces in it. I don't know why they feel they have to put in these things in plastic bags. Very annoying as far as I'm concerned. So template for the wall, that's absolutely fine. That looks the same as the fitting I've already got. We've got a sticker or 10 to stick on windows and things like that. So these are sticky on the back. So that's quite helpful. I do have a larger one as well. From the old camera, I've only got one left, but yeah, good quantity of those. So that's good news, because if you don't put the sticker up, this is at least in the UK, someone breaks in or does some damage or whatever, you call the police, they won't use your recording unless you've advertised that you are recording. So yeah, we have to have that put up. These are the waterproof connections for the camera. Operation instructions. Yeah, well, that's fine. I'm going to be just putting this in place. I think the software might be slightly different. That's the only thing. Ethernet cable. I mean, this Ethernet cable, there's nothing wrong with it. It's a bit short, obviously. I won't be using this because I've already got cable attached. This is about 800 millimeters, maybe a meter at a push. But handy. I'll just stick that in the box with everything else. Some screws, and then the actual camera, and a bunch of padding, of course. So here's the camera. It's pretty small, white, unfortunately, and yeah, it's pretty nice. It's got a slightly different design for this section than the 410. The 410 has a bracket in there and then a mounting screw that enables you to loosen it off, whereas this one has a screw just here. Now that rotates freely, and then we can just tighten that up and lock it in position. Great. In the back here it has a position for an SD card, and you can put up to a 256 megabyte SD card in there. And it will record onto that and then also record onto another recorder if you need be. And there's our cable outlet there. So mine is going to be fitted on a wall, and so this ball joint here turns as well, so you can get your camera. So these look to be the same size as my original fittings on the 410, so I'm just going to pop a bit of tape on these because they need to feed through a hole in my wall. And I'll go and fit it. So here's the old camera up here, and we'll do our best to pop that off. It's freezing cold out here and it's just starting to rain, but other than that everything's fine. Okay, so the 3 holes are drilled using the template and raw plugs attached, and then the centre hole is a 22mm hole going straight up, and it's angled upwards to keep water out. It has to be that big because of the connectors on the camera. Now, if you're fitting this industrially, you might be better actually using an IP66 junction box and feeding the cable from the camera into that, and then just putting the Ethernet cable through the wall. That would probably be neater and better overall, but for my purposes, this is fine. And these are not the easiest, in fact, to feed. In terms of layout, there's one hole, like a cable exit point, in one side of the patras, and I want to put that at the bottom, ideally, so that should any water find its way behind here, it can get out. Okay, we're done. Just turn this right. I think it's going to be about there, but pointing down a bit further. Yep, probably about there. We will make our last adjustments when we've got it connected up. Yep, so up in the roof of the workshop, here are our cables dropping through, and there's a Ethernet lead up there with power over Ethernet that I can just plug this into, and then I'm just going to pop a bit of tape around it just to keep any dust out. Oh, okay, so I am in from the freezing cold, and okay, so it says to go to support, and then app and client. Here's our system requirements, and here is our version 8.52 updated 7th of December. So I'm going to save that because I prefer to save these, and so let's get this started up. And as we can see, it's attempting to connect to the existing driveway camera at the moment. And then it's saying camera 1 is not initialized. Okay, let's do this. Let's create a password then. Okay, that's better. Driveway. So rather annoyingly, you do have to press the tab key after you've typed in driveway, otherwise it doesn't recognise you finished typing there. And as we can see, it has in fact connected up, and it's showing us a decent picture of our driveway, which is pretty good. And we've got a nice clear picture, and we can see right up to the garage doors on the other end. But that's fine. Let's have a little look at the camera settings. So I don't want a watermark, thank you very much. This is the Reolink in the top left corner. Camera name appears down at the bottom right hand corner, so it just says driveway down there, and date and time top and center. It is not 6:30, it is it'll be the wrong time zone, that's the only problem there. Yeah, I don't need anti-flicker. There's privacy mask we can look at in a second, and there are some advanced settings too for brightness and things like that, which I shall just leave alone. But anyway, privacy mask. So privacy mask, we just literally draw a box. I'm going to draw one across the top. That will also work as a black background for the date and time at the top. And I'm going to draw something so that I can't see into the windows on the house above. So that's done fine. And the right hand side I will block off a little bit as well. There is a club entrance over there that I just want to mask out. I don't want to see people standing around there talking to each other and things. This doesn't affect the detection of movement. It's literally just for privacy purposes. So now that I've saved that, we can see we have this sort of black area on the main screen, and we can also see a kind of little round thing here indicating it's detected movement. This is on the top right hand side, this little smear. We can play around a little bit with brightness and things down here, but I think I'm just going to leave it as it is for the moment. Now I need to change its network settings. So the gateway and everything's fine, but so it has auto detected on the network absolutely fine, but I would prefer a static IP address, and this is going to be 0.98. Thank you. Okay, that's better. 92. Okay. Okay, 24-hour daytime, maybe sync with client. Okay, there we go. So it's simple as that. It's picked up this GMT Dublin, Edinburgh, London. Maintenance, we can obviously make sure we got the latest version of thing. Yeah. Funnily enough, it doesn't, as far as I know, this online upgrade is for the software, or is it for the firmware? I can't tell. Anyway, seems to be up to date. So let's come back to detection alarm. Drop down the motion detection. Okay, and it's currently set to, so I'm going to set that to 46. Actually, I'm going to set it to 48, which makes it really, really sensitive. What I'm also going to do, however, is I'm going to mask out some areas. So I don't want these areas to detect. So there's not much point in me trying to detect anything above the height of a person. So this one is actually quite important, because the wall that I'm shading at the moment is where I get a lot of shadow in the winter, moving shadow from trees, which creates a lot of false alarms. Check audio and light. Okay, it's set to auto, so they'll just turn on when they need to. I don't bother recording audio. Right, so surveillance on here. I don't need any of this because I'm going to run this off a separate system which will do its own surveillance. Okay, so there we go. So let's look at using the 810 on the NAS. So here's the QNAP, and as you can see, I've got Surveillance Station installed, and I could open that, but there's not much point. It won't work with the 810. It only runs up to the 500 series of cameras. So anyway, at the moment you can see I've got an install running here on QVR Pro version 2. Now this set of icons across here are available bog standard with the QNAP that I've got. Now different QNAPs have different versions of it and different numbers of camera licenses. I think mine's a 451 plus, and it has 8 camera license, so that's pretty good. So surveillance is ready. Let's open it and see what happens. Okay, so firmware version, installer, memory, RAID group. Okay, next. And you're happy with the date and time. It's interesting. It installs it so that you can install it. Not really the most impressive of installations. So I'm going to follow through this tutorial, and briefly it's going to involve me setting up some storage space, then setting up the cameras and telling the cameras how to record onto that storage space, and then setting up some rules for motion and things like that and linking it all together. And that's because this is a very flexible solution. And notice there's nowhere to even view the videos at the moment. So first up, it's telling us to create a storage space. So here we go, just following the instructions on the screen. So there we go, I've got 6 point something terabytes free, create storage space, and there we go. It's basically telling me what it wants to create, where it wants to create it, what size it wants to create. Okay, so we'll just call it cameras, and it's suggesting that it needs 2.6 terabytes. Nice. It's going to pre-allocate that, which is fine, and yeah, we'll go for next. Okay, just zoom in a bit, just hopefully that will help make everything visible. So it's just asking for a spare volume to be set up, and then telling me I haven't got space to do it. So moving on. There we go, a little summary, and apply it. And we're up and running with our storage space. Okay, and it very kindly asked me, do I want to add some cameras straight away? And of course I do. And so here we go, just tells me that I've got no feature upgrades there, things like AI face detection and things like that. So I haven't got any of that, I'm not going to pay for that. And yeah, do I want to export some settings, import them? No, I don't. I'm going to click the big add button. Okay, and here you can see it is running an auto search for the cameras, and it's found one. It's just not the right maker, although it probably would work. But I can just click on next, and I can change that to the right details. I could in fact just click on next and just completely ignore the search and just enter the details manually. So here we go, just picking the camera that I want. And it's make, and happily, there it is. And yeah, I need to change the port because and add the password and things. Otherwise we're going nowhere with any of this. Okay, excellent. And we'll click test. And there we go, good result. Okay, so we now get to choose whether we want to record normal recordings and event recordings, and what streams to record them to, and we can have multiple streams or we can just set it to one stream. Now notice just above the area that I'm working, there is actually a stream settings button. It's not very obvious, but it is in fact a button, and if you press that you get to do things like resolution and frame rate and things like that, but finding them is tricky. Now we're going on to event rules here, and in fact I'm going to abandon this bit and I'll come back to it in a minute or two, and that's because it's very difficult to add your event rules when the camera is not yet fully added. So yeah, easier to come back to this bit and explain it on a separate snippet. So as you can see here, I'm trying to add an event, but I've got the media NAS, which is the name of my NAS, but I don't have the camera listed, so I can't add an event to it. That's pretty useless. So that's clearly a bug in the way they've set this up. Anyway, let's finish adding the camera, and there we go. There is the camera in our camera settings summary, and it's not running any events or any recordings at the moment. It's just showing as idle, and that's because the events aren't actually created. So I've told it to do event recording and there are no events. So hey, guess what? That won't actually do any recording. Okay, so back to the tutorial, and it's now telling me to install QVR Pro Client, which is the desktop client, which will connect to the server. And yep, there we go. That's what happens when I click on it. So it's worth noticing at this point that I've just gone back to the Reolink view, and the resolution has changed. Actually, although it's kept the privacy mask, it's now in the wrong place, and I can't see the driveway opposite. And yeah, so what's happened there is the resolution has changed, and the Reolink camera has thrown away some of its data. So the detection mask, for example, has been thrown away. Yeah, so the QVR has actually overridden the Reolink software. And it's okay once you figure out that it's doing that. It's easy enough to deal with, but it's worth noting. And if you do change resolution, you do lose your detection mask. So I went to the internet to search for the software using Google and also the QNAP store, and went around in circles for a very, very long time before I eventually tracked down the QVR Pro Client software. Now the QVR software, which is also available, doesn't work. You need the QVR Pro software. Rather than subjecting you to looking at hundreds and hundreds of pages on the internet, I will take you to the right place. So this is the type of place that you go to when you search in the QNAP site, and it takes you to licenses and wants you to buy things, and still doesn't take you to the Pro client. So it's not in the surveillance section at all, it's in the utility section, and then you click on surveillance, and then it just takes you straight to the QVR Pro client. Download the version that you want. And it's worth the trouble. But of course for you it's not any trouble, because I'm going to give you the link down below. So download and install as usual. Okay, and we run it up. Hopefully. Yep, there we go. And it wants to log in. Now remember, of course, this is to your NAS and not to the camera. Okay, and I will save the password and just log in for the moment. And fingers crossed, it just takes a second or two. And there we go, a little bit of, help and all that sort of stuff. Which is basically that you can drag and drop stuff and move things around and create views and all that sort of jazz. So there's my camera. More help just in the way. And fingers crossed. Yep, there we go. We have an infrared view because it's nighttime now. It's taken so long to find this software. And but there we go. There is our infrared view working absolutely perfectly. And now this is just live view that I'm showing at the moment. And of course, I've only got one camera, so we're not seeing any interesting things going on here. But we do see a recording bar down at the bottom with some blue areas, which indicates recording that it is done. And that's normal recording. That is not event recording. There's a couple of very fine lines in it indicating where some events took place. Anyway, so there is our client up and running, and yeah, I've clicked on that, and there we go. We have a playback. So we just moved back in time a little bit, and yeah, we have a playback from earlier in the day just by selecting where we want it on the bottom bar. And yeah, there's lots of facilities available then, but I might show a different view of it in a minute or two. For the minute, let's get on with the problems at hand. So I said earlier I'd come back and we'd look at setting up event monitoring on QVR, and here we go. So we're just adding an event, give it a name. When do we want it to operate? All the time, thank you very much. Click on next. Okay, and it wants to the event, so if, and there we go, we have camera 1 available now, so we're going to select camera 1. Okay, so if camera 1, and then type is motion detection. So if camera 1 detects motion, and then we can go across to the right hand side, and we add a then. What are we going to do if we detect it? And we can see straight away that it has an action and event recording, and we're going to event record camera 1. So we see lots of things we can possibly do, depending upon the type of device that we've got connected. Click OK. So that's our event set up. Okay, and we apply it. It was selected. and we'll see the rule appear in a second or two. And there it is, and it's turned on. And in summary, every day, movement runs every day, and yeah, if I detect a movement, then I record. Okay, and there is camera 1, and he's now recording an event. So absolutely superb. So that's brilliant. Now we can see above that we've got things like camera settings and things like that, so we can change those, and we can change frame rates and all that sort of stuff should we want to, using those buttons up above. Okay, and here we go. Here is our camera, and we'll just click streams, and we can see the streams, and we can see that event handling is enabled. We'll turn off normal recording, and now we'll only ever record events. And that's it. That's our event recording set up. Okay, I need to wait just a little while before I can show it in the client, because obviously I do need some events to actually stack up. So here we are on the next day, and we're just connecting up, and we can see across the bottom the timeline, and we can see red lines all over it, and these are vertical lines are showing when it was actually recording, and it's red because it was an event. Now I'll do a quick tour of the screen. On the right hand side we have a series of tabs, so we've got AI and things like that. Oh, and the screen is flashing because it will have picked up some sort of action, some event has actually happened, and it adds that in on the top and says that happened just now. So across the top we've got various filters. We can do AA face detection and things like that. In the center we've of course got the camera. Down the right hand side, starting at the top, we've got various predefined views, and we can add new views. We can name them as we want. In the middle we've got the cameras. We can drag them in. We can create views with any configuration we like, and we've even got maps, so we can draw maps of our property and where the cameras are and select them, that sort of stuff. Along the bottom we've got the timeline, and this is showing all the events and recording for that camera. If I chose a different camera, it would show that camera's event recordings and things like that instead. And we can do things like downloading clips and things like that from here as well. So yeah, pretty fully featured interface at this point. We can even do things like zooming in and creating regions of interest and things like that on the videos. And had we got motorized cameras, we could operate the motorization from here too. Yeah, there we go, and let's go and have a look at some playback. Okay, by the magic of video we have gone back in time, and across the bottom we can see a block of blue which indicates that we've recorded normally, and then some red event lines indicating the lines, and we can see a whole list of things that we might be interested in watching on the right hand side, which are events. Now the arrow down here enables us to jump from one event to the next event and the next event and so on, and just preview each event, and underneath that there's a playback speed, so we can go up to 16 times speed if we want to. Okay, let's have a look at an actual useful event, and here we can see an event a little later in the evening, but it's still a recorded event. We can see that from the timeline at the bottom, and of course the time up at the top, and that was me just wandering by and triggering the security lights and things like that. So the camera pretty much instantly switched out of infrared mode and back into normal daylight mode. So yeah, that's pretty good, and it's very fast at doing that switch in both directions from infrared to visible and visible to infrared if it needs to. So this is the same clip again, and you can see that I've zoomed in a little bit on the picture, and also on the timeline at the bottom we've now got very easy to identify separate events. And yeah, there's me jumping to the next event, and I don't know what that event is, but we'll see soon enough. It's probably just the light turning off or something silly like that. And we can move the mouse down and we can kind of preview what we've got for the event down there. So in terms of the timeline, I've installed the second camera again. Everything is working. I've got both cameras playing, and now I'm going to look at this Reolink NVR device, just to take all that load away from my QNAP NAS device. So I haven't shown the installation of the second camera and it working on the client. It's just fine. It's just the same as before. There's no point really. So here's the NVR anyway from Reolink, USB port, on off switch, some navigation controls on the front panel. On the back we have got HDMI and VGA connectors, and there's another USB port there and an audio output port. So a little worried that I might have to connect this to a monitor to make it work properly. There is a eSATA port. I can put a 6 terabyte extension disk on there if needs be, or of course I could just open the tin and put a new one inside. There's 2 terabytes fitted from the factory. On the right hand side we've got a 8-port power over Ethernet switch. Now it's not obvious, but that is not connected to the LAN. So the LAN only does the playback and it connects it to the disk basically. So it's not quite like a switch. Okay, in the box, what have we got? So when you connect your cameras to this, they will not work with your old client software anymore. In the box, mains cable and European mains cable as well. What else have we got? Here we've got a little mouse, which kind of makes me nervous that I might really have to fit that. And we also have a 48 volt power adapter and 1 meter Ethernet cable as well. And there's a HDMI cable provided also. So anyway, I don't really want to use this on the desktop. I want to use this on my network. So I'm going to basically plug in the power supply, plug in the network cable, and take this and put it in the cabinet with the rest of my network gear and hope that I can operate it without a monitor and keyboard and mouse and stuff. Okay, so back at the desktop, and we can see the existing software is what is used, and down the left hand side there's the 2 original cameras trying to connect and failing because they no longer appear on the main network, so we can't just use the IP addresses to access them anymore. And there's the NVR now on the list, and it's saying that it's not initialized essentially, and we click on it and it does exactly the same as happens with a new camera, so that's at least consistent. So we'll give it a password, and next up it will want a device name just to recognize it. So that doesn't seem to be saving, so I've gone into settings, and there's my camera list, and they're not enabled, and we can see that loading has failed, and this is just the start of the problems. So to cut a long story short, in order to get all this to work, you have to first of all delete the cameras from the left hand side over here, so you're just left with the NVR, and you can see the NVR is now called cameras, there we go, we get a event notification of the car going by there on the bottom camera, and we've got both cameras joined up now, and we have to delete the 2 cameras and plug in a monitor and a mouse into the NVR itself, and then it enables you to select the 2 cameras. It shows the grid with all the cameras. You can select each camera, put in a password so it can connect up properly, and then set up the internet IP address and camera name and things like that on that actual monitor. Once you've done that, it's possible to come back to the network connected version, and magically it all works. So that's great. If only it had said somewhere in the instruction book, do not try and set it up by network, connect a monitor first, or it would recognize the cameras, because this now does recognize the cameras. If I click this little button here, we see the 2 cameras named driveway and studio, and those are absolutely fine, and I can double click on double click here, and I can zoom into one of those cameras. And that behaves itself perfectly well. Change to studio, there we go, and we just load up studio. And we can change to playback up at the top here if we wish to. And this is all kind of running the cameras now as subsidiaries of the NVR. Now, there are no longer any settings on the cameras. There's one setting up here. And if I go to that, then we can see this is the display panel, so we can see driveway, or I can choose studio or any of the other channels should I wish, and then all the normal options are there, and essentially I control the options via the actual NVR. So same client software, same behavior of the client software, it's just that it's now going via the NVR instead. And an unfortunate little thing, which I consider to be a bug really, for me, I would have put the camera at the top of this on a banner and then gone to the various pages or on the left hand side. So if I, for example, choose Studio, actually I might be on the wrong page here, but anyway, then go to Surveillance Record, you'll notice it's now giving me the schedule for driveway. Although it has adapted, it recognises that now I can set an alarm for any motion, a person or vehicle and things like that. So it does actually work perfectly well now. I have it established, but without plugging in a monitor and manually setting it up beforehand, I could not get it to operate solely over the network. Now it is running solely over the network now. If I go to playback, then we get a similar sort of thing than we saw with the QVR Pro. It's just not as pretty. So down here at the bottom we have got an event line with blue tabs wherever it has done some recording. If I go to about, let me see, when would it be? I'm going to go for just here, I think. So there we go. This is a recording during the day. No problem there. Let's just go a little bit later in time. Now I can just scroll in and out on this line at the bottom here and kind of magnify it up. So there we go. Some people, including me, coming out of the back door, and that's triggered this little event log just here. So it works pretty much identically on the phone, just with the constraints of it being a phone app instead of this. And here down at the bottom, it tends to default to streaming in low resolution. So if I switch that to clear and press play, then we should get a much clearer resolution, just in case you thought it was a very blurry camera there. Okay, so there we go. That is up and working, and it appears to work perfectly well. There's very little control over the actual files and things. I can click on a download button down at the bottom right, and then it gives me a database of recordings, and enables me to see constant recordings and events and things like that. So all these little dotty things are events. If I change to driveway, again we can see events on the driveway. Could play them back if we wanted to, but I guess for today that's about all. So let's summarize. I've been looking at the Reolink RLC 410 5 megapixel camera and the RLC 810A 8 megapixel camera. They're pretty similar, both wired. You can power them both over Ethernet. Software easy to install, yeah, no problems there at all. Quick to learn, both the phone and the desktop version. I was disappointed with the 810. I don't think it's as competent in low light as the 410. It gets a bit blocky, and I think that the claims about extra sharpness are not real. It has a wider field of view, and therefore the actual physical pixels don't really translate into a sharper picture. It does actually use more software sharpening, so I think that's a bit of a cheat, really. I'm not really getting much more over the 5 megapixel version. And for recordings, unless you want to leave your PC or Mac on all the time, then you're going to need either a NAS or an NVR to do the recording for you. From the QNAP stable, Surveillance Station is about as easy as it gets, but it only records 2 cameras unless you buy a license, and it only goes up to the 500 series of cameras. QVR Pro, which is also free on the QNAP platform, that works with pretty much anything. It's really competent. It's very professional. It's got a bit more of a learning curve and a bit more of a setup curve, but yeah, I'd recommend that if you actually want to use your NAS for this. You've got to be aware that you're going to use a lot of disk space, and you're going to use a fair bit of processing power and memory as well on your NAS should you go down that route. The Reolink NVR, of course, takes the network load away from the NAS. It's pretty cost effective. Of course, the software is not as advanced as the QVR Pro, But it's okay. I think it's perfectly fine. It does the recordings, it does the playback, it does everything you want from it. So what more do you want, really? Obviously, you are not going to be able to integrate other makes of camera and other devices with your cameras on that platform. Installation and instruction manuals were a serious mess on the Reolink NVR. I think they really should attend to that. I found that because I'd got pre-used cameras, I needed to do all of my setup from an actual physical plugged-in screen and mouse on the NVR. Many people might want to use it like that anyway, and that's fine. But I suspect a lot of people want to use it over the network in the same way that I do, and that was less than straightforward. Having to plug in a mouse and keyboard, so a mouse and monitor, to do the setup was not really acceptable, and they could get around that in software without any problems at all. But anyway, that's about it. Hope you enjoyed this video. If you've got comments, of course, please feel free to leave them down below. And as always, please remember to like and subscribe if you haven't already done so. That's really, really helpful if you do that. And until next time, take care.